right when I perfectly set up a shot. Okay, come on. Come on, kitty. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Good evening and welcome. Tonight we are going to be going over the history and geography of Sweden. Sweden, as you can see, is a very long country. It's located in Scandinavia, which consists of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. It is also a Nordic country, the Nordic countries being Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Iceland. And it is located up in the very, very cold Arctic area up here in the north of Europe. So let's start our geography up north here. Get my pencil ready. This whole part of northern Sweden up here is known as Norrland. I've really been practicing my Swedish, you guys. Basically, like half my research time has been learning pronunciation. It's an interesting language. Norrland is very mountainous, very forested, and very snowy. You can see this big long mountain range up here on its border with Norway. In Sweden, it's known as the Shaolin Mountains. And you can see the highest point in Sweden up here. It is Kebnekaise. Also, the longest river in Norway is up here. It's called the Torne. It flows out from this lake called Tornehøsk. It's a challenge still. And it flows out and makes up its border with Finland and flows out into the Gulf of Bothnia. So those are the only two countries that Sweden technically borders, Norway and Finland. Also up here you can see it says Lapland. This area crosses into these three countries here, and it is home to the Sami people, who are most famous for raising reindeer. Yes, this is where Santa Claus lives, up in Lapland. So you will find a lot of Sami culture in this area of Sweden. Down here in this middle section of Sweden, right around here, it's known as Svealand. And it is not as, tundra-like or anything. It's still very forested. It has a lot of agriculture, a lot of major cities in this area, particularly the capital city of Stockholm. And it also has a lot of lakes. Now, Sweden is full of lakes. There are around 97,500 lakes, but the largest lakes, as you can see, are in this area. The largest being Lake Vänern, Lake Vätern. There's Hjälmaren, and Mälaren. It's so difficult, but really interesting language. I'm really into it, honestly. This lake is where we can find Stockholm, as the lake kind of flows out into the water here. That's where Stockholm's located. And let's see. Yeah, we also have the major city in this region of Uppsala and Gothenburg over here. And then we move on to this lower portion down here. This is known as Yotaland, and it's much flatter than the rest of Sweden. They have like a plateau area down here, lots of coastal plains. You find lots of farmland in this area. It's the most fertile part of Sweden, especially along the coastline here. And it contains the city of Malmö, one of their major cities. And very interestingly, they have a big bridge and tunnel that connects to Copenhagen in Denmark. So it doesn't technically border Denmark, but it connects to it. So it kind of does, but it kind of doesn't. We can see these other major bodies of water that it borders, the Baltic Seas over here. And then there's these two, which for whatever reason I have the hardest time pronouncing in Sweden, so I'm just going to go with the American English pronunciation of Skagerrak and Kattegat. I think it's like Kattegat or something. It's difficult. If you are Swedish or know Swedish, feel free to correct any of my pronunciation in the comments. I've really worked hard, but I know I'm not close to being perfect, but I've had so much fun learning how to pronounce Swedish things. A really cool language. Hopefully soon I can do a language video on Swedish, because I keep looking up Swedish pronunciations. But anyway, it's in these areas that we have lots of islands. The two largest islands being Gotland over here and Öland over here, this big long one. Sweden actually has, are you ready for this? How many islands do you think Sweden has? Like 1,000, 2,000, 5,000? Sweden has 267,570 islands. My goodness, that's way too many islands. But less than 1,000 are inhabited. So it's, I'll show you a map of the city of Stockholm in this book. Once I finish the history, we'll flip through it, because there's actually many different islands in Stockholm. All kinds of little islands all along the coast here. Very, very interesting country. Geographically, but also historically. So let's get into it. So the reason that Sweden has such an interesting landscape, and the fact that there are these big mountain areas, all of these lakes and rivers, all of these huge lakes here in this area being so much flatter than the rest of Sweden, is because this country used to be completely covered in glaciers. And after the Ice Age, after they melted, this landscape down here was the result of that. Water running down, creating these low sea level plains, melting and becoming these big lakes. And then, of course, the higher up you go, the more preserved those glaciers are. So when early man entered the area, they really only inhabited this area down here, since it was the least cold and the least frozen. And those people were hunter-gatherer fishers. So Sweden's always had a fishing, almost like a fishing industry since its very early days. Now, there's not a lot of details known about the political situation in ancient Sweden, or really how daily life was. There are lots of writings in the form of runestones, but they don't go back as far as some other places in Europe and Asia and Africa that are well documented. But they did do some trade with the Romans and a few other territories in Europe at that time. So we do have some descriptions of what these people were like, and they're really, really interesting, actually. There's 4 things that all of them mention, at least to some extent. One being that they're very tall, and that they're blonde, and that they have magnificent horses, and that they have fantastic ships. All the historical documents that talk about this area mentions at least one of those. Like every single one that I found, it's so interesting. What was it? I think it was some Icelandic historian from like the 900, no, surely later than that, but that like went on and on about how great their horses were. It's so interesting. I really wish I knew more about that ancient culture, but we do know a lot about their culture between the 8th to the 11th century, because that was the era of the Vikings. And everyone knows about the Vikings, but did you know that the Vikings weren't just one group of people? There were actually 3 distinct types of Vikings. There were Norwegian Vikings, Danish Vikings, and Swedish Vikings. Norwegian Vikings, which we're actually going to talk about very soon on my channel, explored more out here in the Atlantic Ocean, like Iceland, out to Greenland, and around the British Isles, basically this area of the Atlantic Ocean. The Danish Vikings also went to the British Isles, but also focused on attacking more of the French and Spanish coastlines down here. The Swedish Vikings went east, so they went after what today is Finland, Russia, the Baltic states like Lithuania and Estonia, and they actually went as far as Constantinople down in the Byzantine Empire, and even to Baghdad in what is today Iraq. And there was one group of Vikings that were known as the Rus, which are most likely became the Kievan Rus, which eventually became the Russians. So they came from the Swedish Vikings back in the day. What we kind of know as Sweden today formed sometime around the 9th century, when the king at the time, Eric the Victorious, managed to unite Svealand and Yotaland into one big kingdom. Really the start of what would become the Swedish Empire. In the year 829, Saint Agnar, I believe, I'm sure I said that wrong, brought Christianity to the region. And in the year 1050, Sweden officially became a Christian nation. Of course, they did have their ancient pagan roots. You know, the Scandinavian mythology of like Thor and Odin and all of them is very prominent at the time, and lasted for a bit longer after that, but Christianity won out in the end. And for the next couple of centuries, it's one of those issues where if I went into detail, this would be like a 4-hour video. So I'm just going to summarize that there were many different clashes among the kingdoms of Scandinavia, particularly in parts of Sweden and Finland. And we'll just leave it at that. We won't go into any more details, because if I do, I'm going to go off on tangents, and we don't need that tonight. 2 major events happened in the like 14th, 13th centuries. The first one I'll bring up is the Black Death, which really hit Sweden hard. 1/3 of the population died between 1349 and 1351. If you haven't seen the movie The Seventh Seal, it deals with that event in Sweden at that time. Of course, one of the greatest movies of all time, and really hits different after 2020 watching that movie. But the other big major thing to mention during this time was the Hanseatic League, or Hanseatic League. I've always said Hanseatic. I think it depends what part of the English-speaking world you're from, but the Hanseatic League was pretty much what like the EU is today. At least that's kind of what they were going for at that time. It was an organization started in what is now Germany, and the whole concept was, you know, if we have economic ties to all of these different regions of Europe, everyone wins. So it was like a big trade network. And the big Swedish center was in this city of Visby in the island of Gotland. And yeah, it was a big deal for Sweden. Really kind of helped it economically at that time, at least. In 1319, Sweden and Norway were united by King Magnus Eriksson. And then in 1397, Queen Margaret I of Denmark put the wheels in motion to unite all 3 countries together in what was known as the Kalmar Union. And yeah, like I said, it was Norway, Sweden, and Denmark as we know it today in like one big country. There's a good map in here that I'll show you. But there was a movement for more of a Swedish independence to break away from all of these political ties it had created. So in 1520, King Christian II of Denmark ordered what would become known as the Stockholm Bloodbath. And it was basically like the Red Wedding from Game of Thrones, where he was like, we're going to have a big coronation party, and all of these specific people are invited. And pretty much anyone who was like anti-Kalmar Union were slaughtered over the course of 2 days. Around 100 people were killed at that time, which of course very much upset the nation. There was a big rebellion against the Kalmar Union and the Danes, which were led by a man named Gustav Vasa. And on June 2nd, 1523, Gustav Vasa was named the king. And that's important for a lot of reasons. Basically, in doing so, it wasn't so many words. The Swedish Declaration of Independence, June 6th today is like the big national holiday in Sweden. And Gustav Vasa was very, very important for the history of Sweden. And not just because his lineage is still the royal family of Sweden today. He put the wheels in motion to break away from the Hanseatic League, which Sweden eventually would. And he was also anti-Catholic. He was very much on the side of the Protestant Reformation. So when his grandson ascended the throne, he was also the king of Poland too. His name was Sigismund. So he created like a union between Sweden and Poland, but he was very pro-Catholic, and his actions led to a big civil war in Sweden. Eventually Sigismund was deposed in 1599, and it led to like a lot of anti-Polish sentiment in Sweden for the next couple hundred years. And when his uncle became king, Charles Vasa, he confirmed the Church of Sweden. The Church of Sweden is essentially a Lutheran church, and it became the official Church of Sweden. The height of Swedish power in Europe occurred during the 17th century, in particular during the 30 Years' War. Many, many battles were fought, and a lot of land was conquered. Like over in Russia, Poland, of course, because, anti-Polish sentiments. Lithuania, Estonia, those kind of regions. And the king at the time, Gustav Adolphus, led a lot of major battles during the 30 Years' War and actually was killed during one of them. And yeah, this was the big height of the Swedish Empire, definitely. And there'll be a map in here I'll show you of how vast their territory expanded. However, it all kind of crumbled apart. Starting in 1709, they had a huge loss to a battle against Russia. During a battle against Norway in 1718, the king died on the battlefield, which led to a lot of disarray between the soldiers and the military. The whole military structure started to, start to come apart. During that time, Sweden had to cede a lot of its land back. And not to mention, since Sweden was pouring so much into its military, it was really neglecting the people of Sweden. So there was a famine during this time. Many people left Sweden. In particular, much later in the 18th and 19th centuries, there was like a huge migration, which basically occurred because Sweden had dumped so much money into its military at that time. The last battle Sweden ever fought was in 1814 against Norway, and it was during the Napoleonic Wars. So Sweden had aligned itself with Napoleon, and so had Denmark. And Denmark, in a nutshell, was in control of what was going on in Norway at the time. So, in a nutshell, Denmark basically gave Norway to Sweden, which Norway, of course, opposed, so a battle occurred. And Sweden would be tied to Norway for about the next 100 years or so because of that. But, like I said, that would be the last battle that Sweden would ever fight. And that's because of its economy, essentially, was going down the drain. So many people were leaving. Around 1 million or so Swedes left the country for the United States. But things really picked up during the Industrial Revolution. Sweden really went into full swing there, into lots of factory production, and that really picked up the economy. Sweden remained adamantly neutral for the rest of its history. I believe to mainly focus on its industrial economy, on the people of Sweden, to make sure that that was sound and strong. So they were neutral during both World Wars, World War I and World War II, even though they did, help out both sides in a way. I mean, they were clearly on the side of the Allies for both wars, but they also helped out the Germans to some extent during both wars. But Sweden as a country really became known for its humanitarian efforts. They're involved in a lot of peace negotiations, even to this day, throughout the world. They've taken a lot of refugees, particularly during World War II, which we'll talk about a little bit in this book, and in particular during the various Middle Eastern crises of the 2000s and 2010s. Sweden's taken in many, many refugees from those events. Sweden has adamantly not joined any kind of huge organizations such as NATO. They did finally join the EU in 1995, but voted to not use the euro as its currency in 2003. They still stick with their currency. And that's basically where we see Sweden today. Sweden, of course, being a major world power, has had its ups and downs during, the economic ups and downs of the world, things like that. Sweden is known throughout the world for a variety of things, like its cars, like Saab and Volvo. For music, Abba being one of the best bands ever, and by far the greatest Eurovision winner. Like, literally, fight me, I am right. Abba's the best Eurovision winner. IKEA, of course, is a beloved furniture store, which also sells the iconic Swedish meatballs. What else? There's so many aspects of, Swedish literature. Pippi Longstockings from Sweden. Swedish films, Swedish actors, Swedish directors. Sweden is known for so many things now throughout the world. And it's a cool place. Let me show you some pictures of it in this book. So the cover here is from the Ice Hotel. So it's a hotel. I don't think the city is on the map up here. Not on this map, at least, but it is a hotel that is built every year, completely out of ice, and then it melts after winter, and then rebuilt again for the next winter season. Very snowy cold. Let's see, riding a bike in the snow like that must be uncomfortable. Here's an example of a Viking longship. Very classic, the big red sails, dragons at the end. And here we can see a political map of Sweden. So you can see the three main areas I told you about. We have Yotaland, Svealand, and Norrland up here. Here is a dad with his baby. Sweden is one of those countries that offers paternity leave. They have universal health care. They're basically a welfare state. It kind of talks about it down here. or a welfare state, where they pour lots of money into making sure that, you know, everyone is healthy and housed and free education, things like that. And that's all paid for with incredibly high taxes. So it really depends on what you think is best. It's a big city area. Here's a beautiful landscape. Isn't that pretty? Look at the wildflowers, the blue water. That's so nice. A big cargo ship going through the Baltic Sea. Here is a geographic map of Sweden. Let me bring it a little closer for you to see all the rivers coming down from the mountains. Here you see the Shaolin Mountains. Mount Kebnekaise. I just forgot it without looking at it. It says it right there. Kebnekaise. And all of the lakes down here as well. So many lakes. Hundreds of thousands. Snowy, cold north. And this is actually a picture of the northernmost point in Sweden. Some of its cities. So here is Stockholm on the water. This is Malmö, which has this very famous building called the Twisting Torso, I believe. Does it say it over here? The Turning Torso. I apologize. The Turning Torso. This is a really cool picture of the bridge that connects the city of Malmö to Copenhagen. And this is Uppsala. Really pretty city. Some of the farmland in the southern area of Skåne. And the midnight sun. So if you go far enough north, during the winter, the sun doesn't set during parts of the year because it's so far north up in the Arctic. Which also means you can see the northern lights up there too, which is a big bucket list thing of mine. Enjoying the summer sun and some winter snowmobile riding. Beautiful, beautiful wildflowers out in the field. How lovely. There's the twin flower, Linnaeus' twin flower, and here's Carl Linnaeus, who invented the system that we use today for naming plants and animals, like the two Latin names. Like it says here, Canis lupus is a wolf, but Canis lupus familiaris is a dog, things like that. He's the one that came up with that. We have a cute pygmy owl and a big bear. And a beautiful lynx. I think, if I remember, they're the only wild cat in Sweden. Of course, we have the classic moose. And probably the most famous animal coming out of Sweden would be the reindeer. And, yep, I thought so. Here's a picture of one of the Sami people feeding his reindeer. And we've got some seals looking so cute. Move on to history. Here's a really cool Viking stone. There's another picture in here of their rune stones, but the Viking people were very famous for leaving these huge stones out with writing and pictures about what was going on in that area at the time. So Viking lands, you can see that's where the Vikings lived. And you can see how the Swedish Vikings headed out in this direction. Here are some golden harness mounts. Interesting. Here's a runestone. So there's actually a lot of ancient stone carvings all throughout Sweden. So they've been painted red so that, one, you can see them better, and two, to preserve them in case anything happens, they, can fix it. But this is a runestone. So this was their writing at the time that the Vikings used. And they planted them all throughout Scandinavia and parts of Great Britain that talked about, like what was going on, a ruler, an invasion, things like that. And some of them are still not completely translated today. Very, very cool. Here's the Kalmar Union. So, it included Iceland too, I should have said, but you can see Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and parts of Finland up there, but that was basically Sweden at the time. Here is a really cool picture of Malmö. See, in America we say Malmo, but I've really been working on pronunciation, so now I can't say it. It's Malmö. That's how you're supposed to say it. Kalmar Castle, one of the earliest of the Swedish castles that the royal family used. Here's Gustav Vasa on a big majestic horse. And here he is with his big majestic beard. It says he's getting the first Swedish translation of the Bible, this drawing. Oh, picture, painting. You know what I mean. The Swedish Empire. So, the purple is Sweden in 1560. And basically all these colored areas was as far as they expanded by 1660. So they really reached out and got a lot of land. Here is a factory. It's an iron factory, it says. This is Leipzig, right? Yeah, the Battle of Leipzig, one of the most famous Napoleonic battles of its time. Sweden did participate in that battle. This is a painting of some immigrants leaving town, most likely heading out to the United States to move out. This would be a protest movement in the 1900s, demanding, that more people be allowed to vote. And this is an airplane factory in 1917. Here is Raoul Wallenberg, who was working in Budapest during the start of World War II. And he handed out Swedish passports to as many Jewish people as he could. I think it talks about it in here, how he would wait at the train stations and then just hand out Swedish passports and say, now they're Swedish citizens, you can't take them. Before they were sent off to concentration camps, he saved the lives of countless people, thousands easily, tens of thousands even. Thank you, sir. And this is Dag Hammarskjöld, who was Secretary General of the UN. Just another example of how the Swedes are considered like peacemakers. And he actually died on a plane crash on his way to Africa to negotiate peace in the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Let's see, we've got, that's Volvo, I almost said Saab. A Volvo factory. And these signs are about the vote for whether or not to start using the euro instead of the krona. Here is King Carl Gustav XVI, the current king of Sweden. He doesn't have any political power. It's one of those royal families that is just ceremonial only. Participating in big events and representing the nation, but they don't have any political power whatsoever, the royal family. This is the Swedish Parliament House. Here's Princess Victoria. She's going to be the next Queen of Sweden. She's the heir apparent. And here's the Swedish flag. And no, it's not in the IKEA colors. The IKEA colors are the Swedish colors. Let's read about it. The Swedish flag features a yellow cross on a blue background. The cross's vertical bar is slightly left of the center. The cross represents Christianity. It is called the Scandinavian Cross because it appears on the flags of all the Scandinavian countries. The yellow and blue colors come from the Swedish coat of arms of the 1400s, which has 3 yellow crowns on a blue background. The yellow cross became standard in 1569 when King John III declared that all of Sweden's battle flags should carry a yellow cross. When Sweden and Norway were united between 1814 and 1905, Sweden's flag carried a symbol of the Union in the upper left-hand corner. The emblem was removed in 1906 when Sweden officially adopted its national flag. Here's some very official-looking people in uniform. Neat picture. So this is the Swedish Parliament. It's known as the Riksdag. And it says in this picture that they're listening to the president of Turkey speaking, so they have headphones on to listen to the translators. I didn't really go into depth in researching like all the different politicians. Sweden has, I want to say, 8 major political parties. So it was just too much to really tackle at the time. But this would have been the head of the Social Democratic Party in 2012. This was the Prime Minister at the time this book came out, Frederick Reinfeldt. And here's some people voting. This is a picture of the Supreme Court. It was a former castle, or palace, I should say. If you know the difference between a castle and a palace, put it in the comments. It's a very important difference. And here is Stockholm. So you can see down here, like I was saying, Stockholm exists on all of these different little islands out here. All these different little neighborhoods. Really cool. I didn't know that before researching the history of Sweden. This is the interior of the Stockholm City Council. Great architecture. And look at this. As a Californian, this picture, I was staring at it for a long time, trying to figure out why it was weirding me out. And it's because this road is so beautiful. There's not one road in California that looks this nice. Like perfectly paved, perfectly painted, no holes anywhere. Yeah, it doesn't even look real for me as a Californian. No roads anywhere in California look that nice. The lumber industry is, of course, very big in Sweden, considering it has so many forests. Here's some moo cows out grazing. Beautiful fields. A map of its resources. You can see how it's mostly split between forest industries and the farming industries. Here's a picture of the krona, the Swedish money. Here's a big, beautiful field of rapeseed, which is used to make canola oil. And a fisherman. What is he getting? Lobsters. Yum, yum. Ooh, this guy's working on some microchips. Cool. I didn't know that they were made like that. Little microchips. Here's Alfred Nobel. So he was a Swedish man who invented dynamite. And he was kind of racked with guilt with how many people lost their lives because of his invention. So in his will, he left money to hand out the Nobel Prizes. So the Nobel Peace Prize in particular, because it's like the Norwegians hand out the other Nobel Prizes in science, literature, things like that. But something, I forget how it goes. What does it say in here? Sweden and Norway, the Norwegian Nobel Committee gives out the Peace Prize. I might have it backwards, but it's something like that. Let's see, some miners at work. It says it's an iron mine. And here's another picture of the ice hotel. I don't think I could stay in that. I prefer cold to heat, but I can't handle cold for too long. I get too uncomfortable. Some ships out in Gothenburg. This is Nicholas Zenström, the inventor of Skype. This guy's hard at work in a cafe, most likely. Cute kids having fun. We've got population maps, so you can really see that the majority is down here. Majority of people live along these coastal areas. Not so much up here. Here we have some students. It says these teens are from Iraq, and this beautiful young girl's from Somalia. Oh, look at the sweet reindeer. How beautiful. Their big antlers. So pretty. A sign in Swedish. This talks about the Swedish language. This girl is a Roma. It says 50,000 Roma live in Sweden. Some more about the alphabet. Music class. A beautiful church. Isn't that lovely? The snow against the blue sky. Here's another pretty interior of a church. It looks like straight out of the Seventh Seal, actually. And it says here that this church burned down in 2001. That's really, really sad. Here's St. Bridget, who came from Sweden. One of the bishops of the Church of Sweden. which, I mean, it's noted that she's a woman. There's a lot of gender equality in Sweden in many, many aspects. And of course, there are many Islamic people in Sweden as well. There's some men praying. A really beautiful wedding. It says it's in a Greek Orthodox church. And this is a church service, as you can see up here, but you can see that these people are wearing their traditional Sami clothes. This is a really old statue of Thor. It's kind of cute. I like his hat. You know it's Thor because Odin only has one eye. And in like every old artifact, Odin only has one eye. So if you see two, it's almost always Thor. Beautiful dancing. Here's Abba, one of the best bands of all time. Oh my gosh, I love Abba. I'm obsessed. I know so many Abba songs by heart, the history of them, how they were translated. I could go on and on and on. I love Abba. August Strindberg, a very famous writer from Sweden. This is Selma Lagerlöf. It says the first woman to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature. Ingrid Bergman. So gorgeous. Casablanca is one of the best. Ugh. Don't get me started. There's a big glass industry in parts of Sweden. Looks like this is glass blowing right here. Yep, glass blowers. Having a good swim. Example of what apartments look like, very modern and then very traditional. I was just watching a video about this. There's this old mining town in Falun where they mined copper, and they used the copper to create this color of Falun red and painted the houses with it to keep them more weather resistant. And even though the mine's closed, they still use this color in a lot of houses in parts of Sweden. Swedish meatballs, of course, so delicious. I always eat them in the German style, but, you know, it's still good. The Viking game, it's kind of like billiards without the billiard table, and instead of balls, you have these wooden blocks that you have to throw and, like, knock out the other wooden blocks. It sounds like fun, actually. A very classic midsummer tradition in Sweden, dancing around the maypole. And here's a wedding. They always show what weddings look like in these books. St. Lucia Day is a very important holiday in Sweden, mainly marked by picking a young girl in the village to wear the St. Lucia crown during the ceremony. And this is the best. This is the Galva goat. So, this city decided to build a giant goat for Christmas, and it was burnt down the first year it was built. So the city rebuilds this goat every year for Christmas, and it's almost always burnt down. It's like part of a tradition to burn it down. And actually one year they found that an American tourist came and burnt it down, and he said that he thought it was just like a normal thing to do, is just to burn down the goat, like it's just what's expected. So he didn't realize he was committing arson. But the goat hasn't burnt down since 2016. Obviously in 2020, everyone was staying home and staying safe, so no one came out to burn down the goat. But it's a tradition. And here's another story that there's this science organization club that had also built a goat, and they were offended that this goat won the Guinness World Record for biggest goat. So they always tried to beat out the other goat to get the Guinness World Record. And I think they did it one year, but people burned down that goat too. It's like a joke. It's the best. There's a huge chart on Wikipedia on the page about it, about, how it was burnt down, when it was burnt down, if it was rebuilt that year, and then burnt back down. It's such a funny story. So interesting. Zlatan Ibrahimovic, one of the best soccer players in the world. And a beautiful picture of a guy. What is he doing? He's barbecuing. That's awesome. What a good scene for a barbecue. So beautiful. You can see the red out there that I was just talking about. Iconic of Sweden. That's the end of our book. So that means we're at the end of the video. Look how cute the houses are. Typical Swedish house architecture. So that's it for tonight. I have quite a few videos about Sweden planned for you coming up. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this video relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a very good night. Good night.